Okay, okay, that means the respiration is occurs in cellular level. That means inside the cell only. It is an internal process. Internal, inside, intracellular biochemical process. Intracellular biochemical process. It occurs inside the cell, so that it is called what? Especially for intracellular biochemical process or cellular respiration. So, if anybody is asking what is respiration, oxidation of food molecules. Food molecules in the presence of oxygen, oxidation of food molecule broke down and releasing energy inside the cell. It is broke down and releasing. What is glucose? For example, here I am wrote what glucose. Glucose is the food substance, which is what nutrient. This glucose, in the presence of oxygen, it is broke down and releasing energy. Releasing what? Energy. ATP, adenosine triphosphate energy inside the cell in intracellular biochemical process. So, respiration is the internal process, breathing is the external process. It occurs in outside the body, it occurs in inside the body. Outside means what? It occurs in what? Respiratory tract and respiratory organs are involved. In respiration, cellular level, it occurs inside the cell. So what is the respiration? If anybody is asking, respiration is the process of biochemical process, intracellular biochemical process, food molecule and broke down and releasing energy inside the cell. That is we can call broke down food molecule and releasing energy. That is we can call it specially for what we call respiration. Don't confuse breathing and respiration. Okay, breathing is a part of respiration. So, what is the main purpose of breathing? Just it is sending. What it is sending? It is sending the gases into the body. Into the body. Oxygen into the body. Sending outside the body. What? Sending out. Removal of waste gases like carbon dioxide outside the body. That is we can call breathing. And respiration is the inside the cell, each and every cell, the glucose molecule in the presence of oxygen, it is broke down and releasing energy. That is respiration. So, respiration is the internal process. Okay, now we are going to discuss about types of respiration. What we have to discuss? Types of respiration. So, right here, types of types of respiration. How many types of respiration is there? Generally, respiration is what? Two types of respiration. One is aerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration. Second one is anaerobic respiration. Anaerobic. Anaerobic. So that okay. Glucose broke down and releasing energy. Okay, so okay, respiration is two types of respiration. One is aerobic respiration, second one is anaerobic respiration. Anaerobic means what? Generally the meaning is what? In the okay, oxygen is absent. So the first one is aerobic respiration. What is the meaning of aerobic respiration? Some organisms some organisms respire. Thus, in some organisms, respiration, some organisms respiration occurs in the presence of oxygen. In the presence of oxygen. Here, oxygen is required. In the presence of oxygen is required to these animals. Oxygen is required. Okay, oxygen is required. So, aerobic respiration means what? Some organisms respire in the presence of what? oxygen. So oxygen is involved, oxygen is required in the process of respiration. Without oxygen, they cannot produce energy. For example, human being, oxygen is required to us, required to our body. Oxygen, we are taking the oxygen. Oxygen enter, first it is enter into the what? Respiratory tract, respiratory organs too. It is enter into the blood to cells. Inside the cell, that is oxygen is what? Involving with react with glucose molecule and broke down and releasing energy, oxidation process, releasing energy, so that indirectly and directly oxygen is required to produce what? Energy. Without oxygen they cannot produce energy. So if you observe or not, when we feel tired, for example, our energy, we lose our energy. At the time, what will happen? We are taking more breath, especially for more gas we are taking in. After taking more gas or whatever is there, after few minutes we feel little bit what relaxed. So we get some energy. How to get that energy means what? With food. Okay, food is required to get the energy. Whatever that glucose, but glucose broke down of glucose molecule require what? An oxygen. By the process of oxidation process, we require also, animals also require what? Oxygen. Some animals were, okay, some organisms, some animals require what? In the process of respiration they require what? Oxygen. The respiration is occurs in the presence of what? Oxygen. So oxygen is required. If the respiration occurs in the presence of oxygen, that is we can call aerobic respiration. In aerobic, aero means what? Here just you have to think oxygen. The presence of oxygen is respiration is occurs in the presence of oxygen. Broke down of glucose molecules in the presence of oxygen. That is aerobic. Just you have to, air means here, just you have to blindly you have to remember that is oxygen. So what happened in aerobic respiration? In aerobic respiration, glucose molecule. So glucose molecule broke down in the presence of oxygen. What it releasing? Carbon dioxide and water molecules. So we'll write sentence, water molecules and also energy. It is releasing what? Energy. Energy is releasing in the form of ATP energy. So here in the aerobic respiration, what happened? This glucose molecule is what? Oxidized. In the presence of glucose, oxygen, it is releasing what? Carbon dioxide, water, and energy. So we write C6H12O6. That is the formula of glucose. And in the presence of oxygen, oxidation process, it is releasing carbon dioxide, water, and also what? Energy. Energy is in the form of what? ATP energy. So, okay, glucose molecule broke down and releasing what? Energy. So that 6 okay, for balancing. So, okay, this is we can call aerobic respiration. You have to remember aerobic respiration means what? Some organisms respire, some organisms require oxygen to produce out energy. Some organisms require oxygen to produce energy. Okay, that is aerobic respiration. What is anaerobic? Here an means offset. What is offset? Aerobic. Oxygen is offset. Respire. Some organisms, some organisms, some organisms respire without oxygen. Oxygen is not required to them. Some organisms respire without oxygen. So, oxygen is not required to produce. Oxygen is not required to them in the process of respiration. Here, aerobic respiration, all organisms, 90%, 99%, mostly mostly more organisms are example of what aerobic respiratory organ. That means most of the organisms are respired in the presence of what oxygen. But some organism without oxygen also they respond. Without oxygen is also what they broke down what glucose molecules. Okay, that type of organisms we can call an anaerobic respiratory organism. An anaerobic respiratory organism, for example, if you observe the yeast and bacteria, some type of anaerobic respiratory bacteria. Okay, these are what some microscopic organisms are the examples like yeast and some type of anaerobic respiratory bacteria are example of what an anaerobic respiration types of. What is an anaerobic respiration? In the oxygen is not required. Oxygen is not required. Without oxygen, their respiration occurs in their body without respiration. For example, what happened? What chemical reaction is going on in their body? For example, here also glucose molecule C6H12O6. This is what glucose. Okay, this glucose in the absence of oxygen, oxygen is not required to break down of glucose. These okay, some enzymes they are utilizing some enzymes. In the presence of enzymes, what they did, okay, glucose and enzymes, it is releasing what ethanol. Ethanol. What is the meaning of ethanol? I will write as first words ethanol or ethyl alcohol. Ethanol and carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide. It is releasing very less energy. Ethanol and carbon dioxide it is releasing. Okay, if you have to write this one, okay, glucose plus in the enzymatic reaction. There is no oxygen here. There is no oxygen. What is there? Glucose plus enzyme. It is releasing ethanol and carbon dioxide. What? Some microorganisms. Some microorganisms are releasing. So glucose formula C6H12O6 plus enzymes. Some enzymes. Enzymatic reaction. It is releasing C2H5OH. What is C2H5OH? That is ethanol. What we call ethanol. Ethanol or ethyl alcohol plus carbon dioxide. So, in the process of anaerobic anaerobic respiration, okay, in that there is no involvement of oxygen. Without oxygen, in the presence of enzymes, they are releasing what? Ethanol. For example, that process we can call fermentation. What is the meaning of fermentation? Fermentation means the meaning of fermentation. Fermentation means what? Conversion of glucose into ethyl alcohol. Ethyl alcohol. Conversion of glucose into ethyl alcohol is called fermentation. Okay, fermentation is nothing but anaerobic respiration process. So that in that what happened? This glucose molecule convert into ethyl alcohol C2H5OH. There is no involvement of what? Oxygen. Without involvement of oxygen, glucose molecule directly converts into ethyl alcohol and releases carbon dioxide. That process we can call fermentation. So that okay, preparation of alcoholic production of production of alcoholic beverages. They are using this process only fermentation in bakeries. Yeast. Yeast cells are what? They broke down the glucose molecule and releasing energy. Releasing what? Ethyl alcohol without oxygen, that is we can call fermentation process. Fermentation means what? Conversion of glucose molecules into ethyl alcohol. So that what happened? Anaerobic respiratory organism, some organisms, some microscopic organisms like yeast, some bacteria, what happened? The glucose, okay, glucose converts into ethyl alcohol and carbon dioxide. So if you observe the bread is very puffy, okay, soft, very puffy bread. Why? Because bread is a very Puffy means what? In between the bread particles, carbon dioxide, trapping carbon dioxide in between the bread particles, so that it is what so much of puffy or soft. Bread is very soft. So okay, especially in bakeries, alcoholic beverages, and the process of they are using the process of preparation of idli, dosa, dough. Okay, they are using this fermentation process only. So anyway, okay, what will be happen? Respiration is two types of respiration. One is aerobic respiration. Second one is anaerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration, what happen? Glucose molecule, okay, in the presence of oxygen, it is what it is broke down and releasing carbon dioxide, water, and energy. What? Glucose molecule. Glucose molecule is what? Food substance. This food substance is what broke down in the presence of oxygen and releasing carbon dioxide, water, and energy. That is aerobic process of respiration. What is anaerobic process of respiration? In anaerobic process of respiration, glucose molecule, the presence of enzyme, there is no oxygen here. Oxygen is not involving. Okay, involving, it is releasing ethanol or ethyl alcohol and carbon dioxide. That process we can call anaerobic respiration. So don't confuse. An means simply you have to blindly you have to remember. An means outside. What is aero? Aero means oxygen. Oxygen is outside. Oxygen is not involved in this respiration. Okay. Example is yeast. Some type of bacteria. Anaerobic respiration is occurs. Okay. So what about human beings? What about human beings? In human beings also sometimes anaerobic respiration is occurs in human beings also. Generally, human beings require more oxygen. Okay, we are multicellular organisms. Each and every cell require oxygen in our body. But oxygen is sending to the body with what? Especially respiratory tract and respiratory organs are involved. Okay, to take the oxygen into the body, which are required. Respiratory tract and respiratory organs are involved in oxygen. We are taking the oxygen into the body, but that oxygen is not sufficient to the all cells. Sometimes what? Okay, for example, in our body generally we means human beings are the examples of aerobic respiratory organisms. We are examples of aerobic respiratory organisms. Animals also aerobic respiratory organisms. But sometimes in our body anaerobic respiration is also occur. Anaerobic respiration is also occurs. How it possible? For example, if we played without rest, if we played any game without rest, if we ran, okay, 5 to 10 kilometer, after 5 to 10 kilometer, what will be happen? It's not possible. Maybe 5 kilometers after running, after 5 kilometers or what, if we played, okay, maybe continuously, what will be happen? Whatever oxygen is there, oxygen in our body, whatever oxygen is there in our body, everything is consumed. So that in our body oxygen levels are very less, or without oxygen, oxygen is not sufficient to the heart cells. At the time, what will be happen? This glucose molecule C6H12O6, this glucose molecule without oxygen or low level of oxygen, without oxygen or low level of oxygen, it is producing what? Lactic acid. Lactic acid or endless 2 ATP energy. Energy I'm writing in the form of ATP's energy. ATP. So here what happened here? In human beings, what happened? In human beings, sometimes when oxygen levels are less in our body, one thing, when oxygen is consumed, the oxygen levels are decreased, oxygen is consumed in our body. At that time, glucose directly converts or producing what? Lactic acid. The lactic acid, generally lactic acid formula, okay, so that I write here C6H12O6 plus lactic acid means what? C3H6 C3H6 and O3. What it is? A lactic acid and 2 ATP energy. 2 ATP energy. So that what, especially for this is what lactic acid. So that this is a C3H6O3. That is what lactic acid. So lactic acid is producing. When it is producing, when in our body, when in our cells, whatever oxygen is there, everything is consumed. Oxygen levels are very less. At the time, directly glucose molecule is producing what? Lactic acid. It is a cause of what? Muscle cramps. Muscle cramps. What is the meaning of muscle cramps? Muscle pains. Nothing but we can call pains. We feel some. Okay, just one example I want to say. For example, if we played any game or anything after a few hours, what will happen? We feel little bit muscle pains. Why? Because the cause of muscle pains, accumulation of in our muscles, accumulation of lactic acid. How lactic acid is produced? This glucose molecule, when the oxygen levels are less in our body, it is producing lactic acid. Who is producing lactic acid? Glucose is producing lactic acid. Where it is producing lactic acid? In our muscles. That lactic acid is the cause of what? Muscle cramps. That means what? We feel muscle pains. So here, sometimes in human being body also what? Anaerobic respiration is occurs. Okay, aerobic respiration, anaerobic respiration. Anaerobic respiration is occurs also in human beings when oxygen levels are very less or oxygen consumed, whatever oxygen levels is there in our body, everything is consumed. At the time, glucose directly converts into what? Lactic acid. C3H2H6O3 lactic acid. It produces 2 ATPs of energy. So, respiration is the internal process. It occurs in cellular level, intracellular biochemical process. So, in the process of respiration, food molecule broke down and releasing energy. That is, we can call respiration. Respiration is two types: aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration, respiration is occurs in the presence of oxygen. So glucose molecule in the presence of oxygen, it is broke down and releasing what? Carbon dioxide, water and energy. And anaerobic respiration, what happened here? Without oxygen, glucose molecule broke down and releasing what? Ethanol or ethyl alcohol. Mostly some microorganisms and anaerobic respiratory organisms like yeast. So that is we can call fermentation. Generally, the fermentation process, if you observe that black grapes, preparation of wine, preparation of alcoholic beverages, they are using this method. For example, just you have to think about in our house, some home. In our home, sometimes we are keeping the grapes in some places. We forgot about that grapes. Maybe 1 or 2 weeks, if you observe it there, the grapes are starts from melting, maybe in black grapes start from melting, it gives some type of alcoholic smell. It taste is also, first it is a glucose sweet in taste, later when it is melted, after that one if you observe the taste, it is a little bit sour in taste. That is we can call what? Fermentation. Conversion of glucose into what? Ethyl alcohol. That process we can call, okay, that process we can call fermentation. Even human beings also sometimes the without oxygen when the oxygen levels are less in our body, it is produced what? Lactic acid. So it is called what? Especially for, okay, it is called anaerobic respiration. So okay, here breathing and respiration is the different. Breathing is the external, okay, it is occurs in external process, extracellular process. This is intracellular process. Respiration is intracellular process. Okay, so breathing means just here inhalation and exhalation of gases, we can call that in process, we can call breathing. Breathing is a part of respiration, but it is not equivalent to respiration. Okay, now students, okay, what we have to do, we are going to discuss about other topic. Just 1 minute you have to give the time.